Imagine stumbling through a foggy graveyard at midnight, the air thick with whispers of secrets long buried. You hear a faint cry, not quite human, echoing from an open grave. That's the kind of mystery that pulls Hercule Poirot, the world's greatest detective, into the chilling case of the phantom of the hollow grave. Get ready for a tale of deception, danger, and Poirot's brilliant mind unraveling the impossible. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Midnight Summons. Picture a stormy night in the quaint English village of Hollow's End, where the wind howls like a restless spirit. Hercule Poirot, our meticulous Belgian detective, is cozied up in his London flat, sipping hot chocolate and organizing his mustache wax collection. It's late, far too late for visitors, when a frantic knock shatters the quiet. Enter Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend, soaked to the bone, his face pale as moonlight. Hastings stammers about a letter he received just hours ago from an old-school chum, Sir Reginald Blackwood, who lives in Hollow's End. The letter begs for Poirot's help, claiming a phantom haunts the village graveyard, terrifying locals and leaving strange, empty graves in its wake. Sir Reginald, a nonsense man, isn't one for ghost stories, so the urgency in his words piques Poirot's curiosity. Why would a man of logic fear a phantom? Poirot wonders, his little grey cells already buzzing. He agrees to travel to Hollow's End at dawn, but not before pressing Hastings for details. The village, it seems, is steeped in folklore about a ghostly figure tied to a tragic death decades ago, a young woman named Eliza Gray, buried in an unmarked grave after a mysterious fall. Locals swear her spirit roams the cemetery, seeking vengeance. Poirot, of course, scoffs at the supernatural. Mon ami, he says, adjusting his perfectly knotted tie, there are no ghosts, only truths hiding in the shadows. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings board a train to Hollow's End. The countryside blurs past, all misty fields and crooked trees, setting an eerie tone. Poirot, ever observant, notices Hastings clutching the letter a bit too tightly. "What is it, Hastings?" he asks. Hastings confesses he's heard rumors of strange lights in the graveyard and whispers of a curse tied to Eliza's death. Poirot waves a hand dismissively but makes a mental note: superstition often cloaks human misdeeds. When they arrive, Hollow's End is as gloomy as its name suggests. The village square is deserted, save for a few nervous glances from shopkeepers. Sir Reginald meets them at the station, a tall man with a furrowed brow and a handshake that betrays his unease. He wastes no time, leading them to Blackwood Manor, his ancestral home overlooking the graveyard. Over tea, he explains the situation. 3 graves have been found empty in the past month, each freshly dug with no trace of the bodies. The villagers are in a panic, refusing to leave their homes after dusk. Worse, Sir Reginald saw the phantom, himself a shadowy figure in a tattered cloak, standing over an open grave last night. Poirot listens intently, his eyes gleaming with that familiar spark of intrigue. He asks to see the graveyard immediately, despite the rain. At the cemetery, the air is heavy, the ground soft from the storm. Poirot examines the latest hollow grave, noting its precise edges and the lack of disturbed earth nearby. "This is no phantom's work," he murmurs, kneeling to inspect a faint footprint in the mud. Hastings shivers, glancing at the fog creeping in. Sir Reginald mentions Eliza Gray again, saying her graven marked and lost 2 timers somewhere in this very cemetery. Poirot's mind races. Is this a case of grave robbing, or something more sinister? He instructs Hastings to fetch the local constable while he lingers, studying the scene. The chapter closes with Poirot standing alone by the open grave, the wind carrying a faint, eerie wail. Is it the phantom, or just the storm playing tricks? One thing's certain, Poirot's little grey cells are already piecing together a puzzle that's far from supernatural. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where we'll follow Poirot as he digs deeper into the village's secrets and uncovers the first clue to the phantom's true identity. Chapter 2. Shadows in the village. The morning mist clings to hollows. End like a shroud as Hercule Poirot begins his investigation. He's not one for muddy boots, but today he trudges through the village, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. Crooked cobblestones, the shuttered windows, the nervous glances of passers-by. Poirot's goal is clear: to uncover the human truth behind the so-called phantom. He starts at the village pub, the Rusty Lantern, where locals gather and tongues loosen over pints. The pub is dimly lit, smelling of stale ale and damp wood. The barkeep, a stout woman named Mrs. Clara Potts, wipes the counter with a rag, her eyes darting to Poirot as he enters with Hastings at his side. Poirot orders a tisane, much to the amusement of the grizzled regulars, and begins asking questions. Mrs. Potts is hesitant, but reveals that the village has been on edge since the first empty grave appeared. She speaks of Eliza Gray, the young woman whose death decades ago still fuels gossip. Eliza, she says, was a maid at Blackwood Manor, rumoured to have been in love with a man above her station. Her fall from a cliff was called an accident, but some whisper it was murder. Poirot listens, his fingers tapping lightly on the table, filing away every word. He notices a young man in the corner, Tom Weaver, who stiffens at the mention of Eliza. Tom's a gravedigger, Mrs. Potts explains, and one of the few who still ventures into the cemetery after dark. Poirot approaches Tom, his demeanour polite but probing. Monsieur Weaver, you work where this phantom roams. Have you seen it? Tom, barely 20, fidgets with his cap, his hands calloused from shovel work. He admits to seeing a cloaked figure once, near Eliza's supposed gravesite, but swears it vanished when he approached. Poirot notes Tom's nervous glance toward the door and decides to press further later. Instead, he asks about the empty graves. Tom insists he knows nothing about the missing bodies, but his eyes betray a flicker of fear. Poirot thanks him, leaving a mental note to keep watch on the young man. Next, Poirot visits the local constable, Mr. Harold Finch, a bumbling man with a moustache that rivals Poirot's in size but not in elegance. Finch's office is a clutter of papers and cold teacups. He shares the police reports. 3 graves, all recently buried, now empty. No signs of theft, no ransoms, just nothing. Poirot examines the reports, noticing the graves belong to villagers who died of natural causes: farmer, a seamstress, and an elderly baker. No obvious connection, yet Poirot's instincts tell him there's a pattern. He asks Finch about Eliza Gray's death. The constable shrugs, saying it's ancient history, but mentions her grave is rumoured to be near an old oak in the cemetery's east corner. Poirot and Hastings head back to the graveyard, the sky now a dull grey. At the oak, they find no marker for Eliza, just a patch of uneven ground. Poirot kneels, his gloved fingers brushing the soil. He spots a faint indentation, like something heavy was dragged nearby. Hastings, he says, this is no random act. Someone is searching for something, or hiding it. Hastings, ever practical, suggests grave robbers looking for valuables. Poirot shakes his head. Nan, mon ami, valuables are taken from coffins, not entire bodies. As dusk falls, Poirot decides to interview the village vicar, Reverend James Lyle, who oversees the cemetery. The vicar's cottage is tidy, lined with books on theology and local history. Lyle is a wiry man with a gentle voice but a troubled expression. He admits the empty graves have shaken his flock, and he's heard the phantom rumors. When Poirot asks about Eliza, Lyle hesitates, then shares a detail. Eliza's death caused a scandal because she was pregnant, and the father was never named. The vicar believes her spirit is restless, but Poirot, ever the skeptic, steers the conversation to recent events. Lyle mentions seeing lights in the graveyard late at night, not ghostly but flickering, like a lantern. Poirot's mind churns. Lanterns suggest human activity, not phantoms. He thanks the vicar and steps outside, where the fog is thickening. Hastings shivers, muttering about curses, but Poirot is undeterred. He decides to set a trap tonight. He'll watch the graveyard himself. As they head to Blackwood Manor to plan, a distant cry echoes through the mist, sharp and fleeting. Hastings jumps, but Poirot's eyes narrow. The game begins, he murmurs. The chapter ends with Poirot preparing for a sleepless night, ready to catch the phantom in the act. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where Poirot's nighttime vigil reveals a startling clue that deepens the mystery. Chapter 3. The nighttime vigil. The graveyard of Hollow's End lies silent under a sliver of moonlight, its headstones jutting like crooked teeth in the fog. Hercule Poirot, bundled in a dark coat that hides his usual polished look, crouches behind a mossy tombstone, his breath steady despite the chill. His pocket watch glows faintly as he checks the time past midnight. Hastings, stationed at the cemetery's west gate, fidgets nervously, his scarf pulled tight against the damp air. Poirot's plan is razor-sharp. Watch the graveyard, catch the so-called phantom in action, and prove it's no ghost but a schemer with a shovel. The night is still, save for the rustle of leaves and the distant bark of a fox. But Poirot's senses are on high alert, his little grey cells humming with anticipation. He's chosen a spot near an ancient oak, a place whispered to be close to an unmarked grave tied to village legend. His mind churns over the clues: empty graves with neat edges, a chemical scent in the soil, a figure seen lurking after dark. Poirot doesn't believe in spirits, but he knows humans can weave tales to hide their deeds. He adjusts his position, careful not to soil his trousers, and scans the darkness. Hastings, meanwhile, is struggling to stay calm at his post, jumping at every shadow. Poirot had instructed him to signal with a low whistle if he spots anyone, entering or leaving, but so far the night is quiet to quiet. 2 hours drag by, and Poirot's patience is tested. His knees ache, but his focus never wavers. Then a flicker catches his eye, a faint, wavering light moving among the graves, like a firefly dancing in the mist. It's no ghost, it's a lantern, held low to avoid detection. Poirot signals Hastings to stay put with a subtle wave, then creeps forward, moving with a grace that belies his fastidious nature. The light stops at a fresh grave, one not yet reported as tampered with. From behind a gnarled tree, Poirot watches a cloaked figure, face hidden, digging swiftly with a small spade. The movements are deliberate, almost professional, no frantic. Grave robber here, but someone with a clear purpose. Poirot's heart quickens. What are they after? He squints, catching a glimpse as the figure pulls a small, tightly wrapped bundle from the gravecloth, tied with twine no bigger than a loaf of bread. The figure tucks it inside their cloak and resumes digging, as if checking for something else. Poirot considers stepping out to confront them, but he wants more answers, not just a chase. He shifts for a better view, but his foot brushes a loose stone, sending it clattering. The figure's head snaps up, the lantern snuffed out in an instant. Before Poirot can react, they're off, sprinting toward the east gate, their cloak blending into the fog. Poirot gives chase, his polished shoes slipping on the wet grass. "Aretas," he calls, forgetting himself, but the figure is fast, vanishing into the night. By the time he reaches the gate, it's just him and the mist. Hastings, hearing the commotion, hurries over, his face a mix of fear and excitement. "Was it the phantom?" he whispers. Poirot, catching his breath, snaps, "No phantom. Hastings, the thief with a lantern and a secret." They return to the disturbed grave, Poirot's flashlight revealing an empty pit. No coffin, no body, just a shallow hole with that same faint chemical smell he noticed before. He kneels, ignoring the mud, and examines the soil. The edges are clean, dug with precision, and he spots a tiny shred of cloth caught on a root part of the bundle's wrapping, perhaps. He pockets it, along with a sample of the soil, for later analysis. The chemical odor nags at him. It's not natural to a graveyard. This is no ordinary crime, he murmurs. Hastings suggests calling the constable, but Poirot shakes his head. "We have startled our quarry, mon ami. They will be cautious now. We must think like them to catch them." As dawn's first light creeps over the horizon, Poirot and Hastings head back to their lodgings. Poirot's mind is racing, piecing together the night's events. The bundle, what could it contain? Why take it from a grave? And why no coffin? He resolves to investigate the chemical clue, suspecting it's the key to the mystery. Hastings, yawning but eager, asks what's next. Poirot's eyes gleam. We follow the scent, Hastings, literal and figurative. The chapter ends with Poirot standing at the edge of the graveyard, the fog lifting to reveal the village beyond. A new lead beckons, and he's ready to chase it. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where Poirot digs into a surprising connection that tightens the web of this chilling mystery. Chapter 4. The Chemical Trail, Hercule. Poirot strides into the heart of Hollow's End, his polished shoes clicking on the cobblestones as he heads toward the village's only apothecary shop. The morning is crisp, the fog lingering like a ghost itself, but Poirot's mind is clear, focused on the chemical scent from the graveyard and the cloth scrap he pocketed during the nighttime chase. Hastings follows, clutching a notebook, his enthusiasm battling his exhaustion from the sleepless vigil. Poirot's goal is to trace the mysterious chemical odor. Could it unlock the secret of the empty graves? He's certain the answer lies, not in the supernatural, but in the tangible world of science and human motive. The apothecary, a quaint shop called Gray's Remedies, is a maze of shelves lined with jars of herbs, tinctures, and powders. Miss Beatrice Lane, the apothecary, greets them with a sharp gaze and a warm smile. She's a woman in her 50s, her apron dusted with dried lavender, and her knowledge of the village runs deep. Poirot, ever charming, compliments her shop's orderliness before steering the conversation to chemicals. He describes the faint, acrid smell from the graveyard, watching her closely. Beatrice's brow furrows, and she mentions a preservative called X12, used in medical schools to embalm specimens. It's rare here, she says, and tightly regulated. Only a place like Blackwood's factory would have it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. This matches the chemical Sir Reginald mentioned. He produces the soil sample, asking if she can identify the scent. Beatrice sniffs cautiously and confirms it's likely X12, though she warns it's dangerous if mishandled, capable of breaking down organic matter quickly. Poirot's mind races. Could this explain the missing bodies? He thanks her and shifts topics, casually asking about Tom Weaver, the gravedigger. Beatrice hesitates, then shares that Tom's been buying odd supplies lately: thick gloves, a small shovel, and a bottle of lye, which could clean tools or hide traces of digging. Poirot nods, his suspicions about Tom deepening. He leaves the shop with a small vial of diluted X12 for comparison. Promising to return it next, Poirot and Hastings head to the village library, a dusty building crammed with local records. Poirot wants to dig into Blackwood's factory, suspecting a connection to the chemical. The librarian, a frail man named Mr. Percy Dunn, helps them find ledgers detailing the factory's shipments. Poirot's keen eyes spot an entry: a crate of X12 reported missing 3 months ago, around the time the first grave was disturbed. The ledger notes the crate was last seen in the factory's storage yard, overseen by the manager, Edwin Carver. Poirot's mustache twitches. Carver's name keeps surfacing, determined to confront the manager. Poirot leads Hastings to Blackwood's factory, a looming brick structure buzzing with activity. Carver meets them at the gate, his smile strained, his hands fidgeting with a pen. Poirot wastes no time, asking about the missing X12 crate. Carver claims it was stolen, likely by a rival company, and insists it's unrelated to the graveyard. But Poirot notices a locked shed in the yard, its door marked hazardous. He asks to see inside, and Carver stammers, saying it's just old machinery. Poirot doesn't push, but makes a mental note to investigate later. During the tour, he spots a worker, a burly man named Jack Riley, watching them closely. Jack's gloves are stained with a faint chemical residue, and Poirot wonders if he's more than a labourer. As they leave, Poirot picks up a discarded rag. Near the shed, its faint X12 scent confirming his suspicions. Back at their lodgings, he compares the rag to the graveyard's cloth. Scrapped they match. Hastings, he says, we have a trail. The chemical links the factory to the graves, but why? Hastings suggests smuggling, but Poirot shakes his head. It is more personal, mon ami. Someone is hiding something in those graves. He decides to tail Jack Riley, suspecting the worker knows more than he lets on. The chapter closes with Poirot and Hastings slipping into the village at dusk. Following Jack as he leaves the factory, he heads toward a secluded path near the cemetery, carrying a heavy bag. Poirot's heart quickens. This could be the break they need. The fog thickens, and Jack's figure blurs ahead. Is he the cloaked figure, or just another piece of the puzzle? Poirot's ready to find out. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where a risky pursuit leads to a confrontation that unveils a shocking piece of the mystery. Chapter 5. The Pursuit in the Fog. The fog wraps Hollow's End in a ghostly embrace as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings trail Jack Riley, the burly factory worker, through the village's winding paths. The evening air is thick, muffling the sound of their cautious steps as they follow Jack's hulking figure. He carries a heavy canvas bag slung over his shoulder, heading toward the cemetery's edge. Poirot's sharp eyes never leave him, his mind buzzing with questions. Is Jack the cloaked figure from the graveyard? Does his bag hold another mysterious bundle? the chemical scent, the missing X12. And now this secretive Trek Poirot senses the threads of the mystery tightening, and he's determined to pull them loose tonight. Keeping a safe distance, Poirot moves with quiet precision, his cane tucked under his arm to avoid any telltale taps. Hastings, less graceful, nearly trips over a root, earning a stern glance from Poirot. "Silence, mon ami," he whispers. Jack seems oblivious, his pace steady as he skirts the cemetery's iron fence and veers into a narrow lane lined with gnarled trees. The lane leads to an old mill, long abandoned, its wheels still and moss-covered. Poirot's instincts scream that this is no random detour. He signals Hastings to circle around, hoping to flank Jack if he stops at the mill. Jack pauses, glancing over his shoulder. Poirot ducks behind a crumbling wall, his heart steady despite the thrill of the chase. Jack sets the bag down and pulls out a small lantern, its dim light cutting through the fog. He kneels, prying up a loose floorboard inside the mill's doorway. Poirot watches, his breath catching as Jack retrieves a small metal box from beneath the board and tucks it into his coat. The bag, now lighter, is slung back over his shoulder, and Jack heads toward the cemetery again. Poirot's mind races. The box could hold the key to the empty graves, but confronting Jack now risks losing the bigger picture. Poirot decides to follow, motioning for Hastings to rejoin him. They trail Jack to the cemetery's back gate, where he slips inside. The fog is thicker here, swallowing sounds and shapes. Poirot's sharp senses pick up the faint scrape of a shovel. He creeps forward, spotting Jack digging near a low headstone, not one of the previously emptied graves. The worker's movements are hurried, his lantern casting jittery shadows. Poirot whispers to Hastings. He buries something, or he seeks it. We must act. Before they can move, a second figure emerges from the fogger woman, her face half hidden by a shawl. She hisses something to Jack, who startles and drops his shovel. The woman's voice is low, urgent, but Poirot catches a name, Eliza. His pulse quickens. Is this about the legendary Eliza Gray, or something else? The woman hands Jack a small parcel, and he resumes digging, faster now. Poirot, sensing the moment slipping, steps forward, his voice cutting through the fog like a blade. "Monsieur Riley, I believe you have something to explain." Jack freezes, his face a mask of shock, while the woman bolts into the mist. Hastings, spurred into action, chases her, but returns empty-handed, panting. "She's gone, Poirot." Jack, cornered, tries to bluff, claiming he's just checking graves for vandalism. Poirot's smile is icy. "And the box in your coat, monsieur, is that also for vandalism?" Jack's defiance crumbles, but he refuses to speak, clutching the box tightly. Poirot, ever methodical, doesn't press further here. He confiscates the box, a small, locked tin with a faint chemical whiff-hand, tells Jack to expect a visit. From the constable, Jack slinks off, muttering, leaving the half-dug grave behind. Back at their lodgings, Poirot examines the tin under lamplight. It's heavy for its size, and the lock is sturdy, suggesting something valuable inside. He resists forcing it open, preferring to unlock it properly to preserve evidence. Hastings, flustered, suggests it might hold stolen goods, but Poirot shakes his head. "This is no petty theft, Hastings. This is about secrets buried deeper than graves." He sends a message to the constable to watch Jack and plans to visit the locksmith at dawn to open the tin. The chapter closes with Poirot sitting by a flickering fire, the tin on the table before him. The woman's mention of Eliza echoes in his mind, tying this night's events to the village's tragic past. Who was she, and what does Jack know? The fog outside thickens, but Poirot's clarity sharpens. He's one step closer to unmasking the culprit behind the hollow graves. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where the contents of the tin reveal a startling truth that pulls Poirot deeper into the web of deception. Chapter 6. The Tin's Secret. The first light of dawn creeps through the curtains of Poirot's temporary lodgings in Hollow's End, casting a soft glow on the small metal tin resting on the table. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, sips a steaming cup of tisane, his eyes fixed on the tin as if it might whisper its secrets. The locked box, seized from Jack Riley last night, is heavy, its faint chemical odor hinting at a connection to the mysterious X12 preservative. Hastings, bleary-eyed from their late-night pursuit, paces the room, eager for answers but wary of the deepening mystery. Poirot's mission today is clear: unlock the tin, uncover its contents, and connect it to the empty graves and the elusive woman who vanished into the fog. His little grey cells hum with anticipation. This is the moment where the puzzle pieces might start to fit. Poirot and Hastings head to the village locksmith, Mr. Amos Reed, whose tiny shop smells of oil and metal shavings. Amos, a grizzled man with a squint, examines the tin with a craftsman's eye. The lock is intricate, not a common design, and he mutters about it being custom-made, possibly for something valuable. Poirot, ever observant, notices Amos's hands tremble slightly as he works, as if he recognizes the tin. After some coaxing and a few well-placed compliments, Amos admits he crafted a similar lock for Blackwood's factory years ago, used for securing sensitive materials. Poirot's moustache twitches. This ties the tin directly to the factory, and perhaps to the missing X12. With a click, Amos opens the lock, and Poirot carefully lifts the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, is a collection of small glass vials, each filled with a clear liquid that smells sharply of X12. Tucked among them is a folded paper, yellowed with age, and a single photograph of a young woman with haunting eyes. The paper is a handwritten note, scrawled in a hurried script. Eliza's truth lies beneath. Protect it at all costs. The photograph's back bears a faded inscription: Eliza Gray, 1895. Hastings gasps, recognizing the name tied to the village's ghostly legend. Poirot's expression remains calm, but his mind races. The vials suggest a chemical cover-up, but the note and photo point to a personal motive, one rooted in the past. Poirot pockets the contents, thanking Amos, and heads to the village library to cross-reference the note's handwriting. The librarian, Mr. Percy Dunn, is reluctant to let Poirot rummage through old records again, but a polite mention of Sir Reginald's influence changes his tune. Poirot pores over dusty ledgers from Blackwood Manor, focusing on the 1890s, when Eliza Gray died. He finds a record of her employment as a maid, but also a curious entry: a payment made to a doctor for discreet services shortly before her death. The signature on the payment order matches the note's handwriting, a looping elegant script belonging to Sir Reginald's grandfather, Lord Henry Blackwood. Poirot's eyes narrow. Was Eliza's death no accident, and is someone now unearthing that truth? Determined to confirm the vial's contents, Poirot visits Miss Beatrice Lane at the apothecary again. He shows her one vial, asking for a precise analysis. Beatrice, her curiosity piqued, tests a drop under Poirot's watchful eye. She confirms it's X12, but notes it's mixed with a rare compound that accelerates tissue dissolution, perfect for making a body disappear without a trace. "This isn't just for preserving," she says, her voice low. "It could erase evidence." Poirot nods, the empty graves now making sense. Someone is using X12 to dissolve bodies, leaving no trace. But why? And how does Eliza's note fit? Back at their lodgings, Poirot lays out the clues: the tin, the vials, the note, the photograph, and the Blackwood connection. Hastings suggests Jack Riley is the mastermind, but Poirot shakes his head. He is a pawn, mon ami, not the player. The woman in the shawl-she is the key. Poirot recalls her mention of Eliza during the graveyard encounter. He suspects she's protecting or seeking something tied to Eliza Gray's death, possibly a family secret buried by the Blackwoods. To test his theory, he decides to confront Sir Reginald about his grandfather's records, but discreetly, to avoid tipping off the true culprit. Poirot and Hastings visit Blackwood Manor, where Sir Reginald is pacing in his study, clearly rattled by the ongoing mystery. Poirot, with his usual charm, asks about Lord Henry's time at the manor, framing it as historical curiosity. Sir Reginald shares a family story. Lord Henry was a stern man, obsessed with the factory's success, and rumours swirled about a scandal involving a maid. He dismisses it as gossip, but Poirot notices a locked drawer in the study desk, its key dangling from Sir Reginald's watch chain. Could it hold more clues? Poirot doesn't press, but his plan is forming. He'll return under cover of night to investigate. As evening falls, Poirot prepares for a risky move, sneaking into the manor to check the drawer. He instructs Hastings to keep Sir Reginald occupied with questions about the factory. The chapter closes with Poirot slipping through the manor's garden, the fog curling around him like a living thing. The photograph of Eliza Gray burns in his mind, her eyes pleading for justice. The tin's secret has opened a door to the past, and Poirot is determined to step through it. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where a daring search uncovers a hidden document that brings the phantoms' motive into sharp focus. Chapter 7. The Hidden Drawer. The moon is a faint sliver above Blackwood Manor as Hercule Poirot slips through the garden, his silhouette blending with the shadows of rose bushes and ivy. The night is still, save for the occasional creak of the manor's old timbers, and Poirot moves with the stealth of a cat, his usual fastidiousness replaced by a single-minded focus. The locked drawer in Sir Reginald's study, glimpsed earlier, nags at Hemmett's key on Sir Reginald's watch chain, suggests secrets tied to the Blackwood family, perhaps even to Eliza Gray's death. Hastings, meanwhile, is inside the manor's parlour, nervously engaging Sir Reginald in a long-winded discussion about factory operations, as per Poirot's instructions. Tonight, Poirot aims to uncover a clue that could unravel the mystery of the empty graves and the tin's cryptic note. Poirot reaches a side door, left slightly ajar by a carefully planned oversight from Hastings, who distracted a servant. Earlier, he slips into the manor, his soft-soled shoes silent on the polished floors. The study is down a long hallway, its walls lined with stern portraits of Blackwood ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow him. Poirot's heart beats steadily, his mind sharp as he navigates by the dim glow of a pocket torch. He reaches the study door, finding it unlocked, and steps inside. The room smells of old books and cigar smoke, and the desk looms in the center, its locked drawer calling to him like a siren. Using a slender lockpicker tool Poirot carries for such rare occasions, he sets to work. His fingers, usually reserved for adjusting his mustache, move with precision, and within moments the drawer clicks open. Inside, He finds a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon, a small leather journal, and a sealed envelope marked private. Poirot's pulse quickens, but he remains calm, methodically examining each item. The letters are from Lord Henry Blackwood, dated 1895, addressed to an unnamed doctor. They discuss a delicate matter involving a maid and request discretion at all costs. The journal, in Henry's hand, details his obsession with protecting the family's reputation, hinting at a scandal that could ruin the Blackwood name. The sealed envelope is the prize. Poirot carefully breaks the wax, revealing a single-pager confession, signed by Lord Henry. It admits to covering up Eliza Gray's death, claiming she fell accidentally during a private disagreement at the manor's cliffside. The confession is vague, avoiding key details, but mentions a keepsake buried with her to ensure silence. Poirot's mind sparks. Could this keepsake be what the cloaked figure seeks? Is it linked to the tin's contents? He pockets the confession, intending to confront Sir Reginald later. But a creak in the hallway freezes him in place. Footsteps approach, heavy and deliberate. Poirot extinguishes his torch and ducks behind a curtain, his breath shallow. A figure enters. Sir Reginald himself, his face pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. He seems agitated, muttering about the past staying buried. He checks the desk, not noticing the tampered drawer, and leaves after a tense moment. Poirot exhales, realizing how close he came to discovery. He slips out, rejoining Hastings in the parlour, where the captain is sweating through an awkward story about his army days. Back at their lodgings, Poirot lays out the findings under lamplight. The confession confirms Eliza's death was no simple accident, and the mention of a keepsake suggests someone is digging for it, using X12 to erase evidence of their work. Hastings, wide-eyed, suggests the woman in the shawl might be a descendant of Eliza, seeking justice. Poirot nods thoughtfully, but cautions, "We assume nothing, mon ami. The keepsake may be valuable, or it may be dangerous." He decides to investigate the cliff where Eliza died, hoping to find traces of the disagreement or clues to the keepsake's nature before dawn. Poirot sends a message to the constable, Mr. Finch, requesting records of any artifacts or jewelry linked to the Blackwood family in 1895. He also asks Hastings to track down the mysterious woman, suspecting she's a local with ties to the manor. As the sun rises, Poirot stands at the window, the confession's words echoing in his mind. The truth must stay buried. But Poirot, ever the seeker of truth, is determined to unearth it. The chapter closes with him preparing for a trek to the cliffside, the weight of the confession in his pocket and the shadow of Eliza Gray looming larger than ever. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where a perilous visit to the cliff reveals a chilling clue that tightens the noose around the phantom's identity. Chapter 8. The Cliffside Revelation. The morning sun struggles to pierce the heavy mist as Hercule Poirot sets out for the cliffside overlooking Hollow's End, where Eliza Gray met her tragic end in 1895. His polished shoes crunch on the gravel path, a rare concession to the rugged terrain, but his mind is as sharp as ever, piecing together the confession from Lord Henry Blackwood's drawer. The document hinted at a private disagreement and a buried keepsake, and Poirot is determined to uncover physical evidence at the cliff that might clarify the motive behind the empty graves. Hastings, trailing behind with a walking stick, and a nervous glance at the steep drop ahead, mutters about the dangers of cliffs in fog. Poirot, undeterred, adjusts his hat and murmurs, "Danger, mon ami, is where the truth often hides." The cliff path winds through gorse and heather, leading to a jagged outcrop where the land falls away to a rocky beach below. The air is salty, the wind sharp, carrying the distant crash of waves. Poirot pauses, surveying the scene with his meticulous eye. The cliff's edge is uneven, with patches of loose soil and exposed roots, suggesting years of erosion. He imagines Eliza here, a young maid caught in a moment of desperation. Was she pushed, or did she fall? The confession's vagueness fuels his suspicion of foul play, and he's certain the keepsake mentioned is the key to the phantom's actions. Poirot kneels, examining the ground for any lingering traces of that fateful night. He spots a small, weathered stone, oddly out of place, half buried near a twisted shrub. Digging carefully with a pocket knife, he unearths a tarnished silver locket, its chain broken but intact. Inside is a tiny portrait of a young man, handsome and stern, with the initials H.B. engraved on the back. Poirot's pulse quickens. Good. This be Lord Henry Blackwood, Eliza's employer and possible lover. The locket, perhaps the keepsake, suggests a personal connection, one worth hiding in a grave and now worth digging up. He wraps it carefully in a handkerchief, knowing it's a vital clue. Hastings, peering over the edge, points out a narrow path leading to the beach below. Against his better judgment, Poirot agrees to descend, hoping to find more evidence. The path is treacherous, slick with moss, and Hastings nearly slips, grabbing a root to steady himself. At the base, the beach is strewn with pebbles and seaweed, the cliff looming above like a silent witness. Poirot notices a shallow cave carved into the rock face, its entrance partially hidden by driftwood. Inside, he finds signs of recent activity boot prints, a discarded cigarette butt, and a faint chemical scent, unmistakably X12. Someone has been here, perhaps using the cave to store or hide something. As Poirot examines the prints, a low rumble echoes above. He pulls Hastings back just as a cascade of loose rocks tumbles down the cliff, narrowly missing them. Dust settles, and Poirot's eyes narrow. This was no accident, he says, scanning the cliff top. A fleeting shadow moves in the fog of figure, watching them. Hastings, shaken, insists it's the phantom, but Poirot's mind is on human culprits. Was this a warning or an attempt to stop their investigation? He collects the cigarette butt, noting its brand, and decides to return to the village to confront Jack Riley again, suspecting the workers' involvement in the cave activity. Back in Hollow's End, Poirot visits the constable, Mr. Finch, to check on Jack's whereabouts. Finch reports that Jack was seen at the factory this morning, but his alibi is shaky. Poirot shows Finch the locket, asking if he recognizes the initials or the cigarette brand. Finch, scratching his head, recalls seeing similar cigarettes in the possession of Edwin Carver, the factory manager, the Webb Titans carver, Jack, and the mysterious woman in the shawl all seem entangled. Poirot instructs Finch to keep an eye on the cave, suspecting it's a hideout for the phantom's tools or secrets at their lodgings. Poirot lays out the locket beside the tin's contents, the vials, the note, and Eliza's photograph. The locket's portrait resembles descriptions of Lord Henry, and the note's plea to protect Eliza's truth suggests a scandal the Blackwoods buried. Poirot theorizes that someone, perhaps the woman, knows the truth and is using the graves to retrieve evidence, dissolving bodies with X12 to cover their tracks. Hastings, horrified, suggests blackmail, but Poirot wonders if it's revenge. He plans to confront Carver about the cigarette and the cave, but cautiously, to avoid alerting the true mastermind. The chapter closes with Poirot standing at the window, the locket in his hand, its silver catching the fading light. The cliffside has revealed a piece of Eliza's story, but the falling rocks warn that someone is watching, ready to strike. Poirot's resolve hardens. He's closer than ever to unmasking the phantom, but the danger is growing. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where a tense confrontation at the factory exposes a betrayal that brings the mystery to a boiling point. Chapter 9. The Factory Confrontation. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows over Hollow's End as Hercule Poirot strides purposefully toward Blackwood's chemical factory, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the cobblestone path. The air carries the faint hum of machinery and the sharp bite of chemicals, a reminder of the factory's role in this tangled mystery. Poirot's mind is a whirlwind of clues: the locket with HB initials, the X12 vials, the cigarette butt from the cave, and the confession hinting at Lord Henry Blackwood's dark secret. He's certain the factory holds the key to the phantom's identity, and Edwin Carver, the nervous manager, is his next target. Hastings, trailing behind with a mix of excitement and dread, clutches a notebook, ready to jot down anything Poirot deems significant. The cliffside's near miss with falling rocks has left them both on edge, but Poirot's focus is unyielding today. He'll force the truth into the open. The factory gates loom ahead, their iron bars rusted but imposing. Poirot adjusts his hat, his expression calm but his eyes sharp as a hawk's. He's planned this confrontation carefully, knowing Carver's evasiveness and Jack Riley's involvement point to a deeper conspiracy. The cigarette butt, matching a brand Finch linked to Carver, suggests the manager is more than a bystander. Poirot's goal is to press Carver without revealing all his cards, hoping to catch him off guard. As they enter the factory yard, workers in grimy aprons glance curiously, their faces etched with fatigue. The air is thick with the acrid scent of chemicals, and Poirot's nose wrinkles, but his resolve doesn't falter. Inside Carver's office is a cluttered sanctuary of papers, sample bottles, and half-empty tea mugs. The manager rises from his desk, his smile forced, his hands twitching as he greets them. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, to what do I owe this visit?" he asks, his voice betraying a hint of unease. Poirot, ever polite, begins with pleasantries, complimenting the factory's efficiency before steering the conversation to the missing 10 to 12 crate. Carver repeats his story, stolen by rivals. No connection to the graves, but Poirot notices his eyes dart to a locked filing cabinet in the corner. "Monsieur Carver," Poirot says, his tone smooth but piercing, "I wonder if you've seen this before." He produces the cigarette butt, holding it delicately between gloved fingers. Carver's face pales, and he stammers, claiming it's a common brand. Poirot presses further, mentioning the cave near the cliff and its chemical traces. "A curious place for a factory man to visit, Nan," he says, watching Carver squirm. The manager insists he's never been there, but his sweaty brow tells another story. Poirot shifts tactics, casually mentioning the locket and its HB initials, watching for a reaction. Carver's hand grips the desk, and he mutters about old family heirlooms, but his voice lacks conviction. Poirot, sensing weakness, leans in. "And what of a woman in a shawl seen in the graveyard? Does she work for you, perhaps?" Carver's denial is too quick, and Poirot's little grey cells hum. Carver knows her. To push further, Poirot requests a second tour of the factory, specifically the storage yard where the locked shed stands. Carver hesitates, citing safety concerns, but Poirot's charm and a subtle mention of Sir Reginald's authority sway him. As they walk through the clanging, hissing factory floor, Poirot's eyes scan for clues. He spots Jack Riley among the workers, his burly frame hunched over a vat. But Jack avoids eye contact, his hands busy with a wrench. Poirot notes a faint chemical stain on Jack's sleeve, identical to the X12 residue. The shed, when they reach it, is still locked, and Carver fumbles with the key, claiming it's just spare parts. Poirot, unconvinced, asks to see inside. Reluctantly, Carver opens the door, revealing crates of equipment, but Poirot's sharp gaze catches a hidden compartment in the wall, its edges barely visible. Before Poirot can investigate, a loud crash echoes from the factory floor, a barrel toppled by a worker, or so it seems. In the chaos, Jack slips out a side door, and Poirot's instincts scream betrayal. He sends Hastings after Jack while he confronts Carver about the compartment. "Open it, monsieur, or I shall call the constable," Poirot says, his voice like steel. Carver, cornered, unlocks the compartment, revealing a stash of X12 vials and a ledger listing unauthorized shipments. The entries show deliveries to an address in a nearby town, signed with a woman's initials, MG. Poirot's mind races. MG could be the woman in the shawl, perhaps a relative of Eliza Gray. Carver breaks, admitting he supplied X12 to a woman named Margaret Gray, who claimed she needed it for personal research. He swears he didn't know about the graves, but Poirot's skeptical. "You profited from her secrecy," he says, pointing to the ledger's payment records. Carver, trembling, insists he's no criminal, just a man in over his head. Poirot pockets the ledger, planning to trace Margaret Gray, but before he can leave, Hastings bursts in, breathless. "Jack's gone, Poirot. He took a cart and headed toward the cliffs." Poirot's mind shifts gears. Jack's flight confirms his guilt, but Margaret Gray is the puppet master. He instructs Carver to stay put, warning that the constable will be watching, and hurries with Hastings to pursue Jack. The fog is rolling in again, cloaking the path to the cliffs. Poirot's cane taps faster now, his thoughts racing. The ledger, the locket, the confessional point to a vendetta tied to Eliza's death, with Margaret as the avenger. But what is she seeking, and why dissolve bodies to find it? The chapter closes with Poirot and Hastings reaching the cliff path, the distant clatter of Jack's cart fading into the mist. The sea roars below, and Poirot's eyes gleam with determination. "We are close, Hastings," he says, gripping the ledger. The Phantom's mask is slipping. The stakes are higher than ever, and Poirot knows one wrong move could bury the truth forever. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where a dramatic chase unveils the final piece of the puzzle, bringing Poirot face to face with the Phantom's true purpose. Chapter 10. The Phantom Unmasked. The fog swirls thickly around the cliffs of Hollow's End. The roar of the sea below, a relentless drumbeat, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings race along the narrow path in pursuit of Jack Riley's cart. The clatter of hooves and wheels echoes faintly ahead, swallowed by the mist. But Poirot's determination burns brighter than ever. His mind weaves together the threads of the mystery, the empty graves, the X12 vials, Lord Henry Blackwood's confession, the locket with HB initials, and the ledger pointing to Margaret Gray. The pieces are falling into place, and Poirot is certain that Jack's desperate flight leads to the heart of the Phantom's schemer, truth buried for decades, now clawing its way to the Surface Hastings, panting beside him, grips his walking stick like a weapon, his face a mix of fear and resolve. "We'll catch him, Poirot," he gasps, but Poirot's eyes are fixed forward, his little grey cells racing to anticipate the final act of this chilling drama. The path twists toward the cliffside cave where Poirot found the cigarette butt and chemical traces days ago. The cart's tracks veer off, leading to a clearing where Jack has abandoned it, the horse snorting nervously. Poirot slows, signaling Hastings to tread lightly. The cave's mouth yawns ahead, its dark interior lit by a flickering lantern glow. Poirot's pulse quickens not from fear, but from the thrill of nearing the truth. He adjusts his coat, ensuring the locket, ledger, and confession are secure in his pockets, and whispers to Hastings, "Stay close, mon ami, but do not act until I give the word." They creep toward the cave, the damp air heavy with the scent of salt and X-12 inside. Poirot's torch reveals a makeshift camp, a crate of vials, a shovel, and a pile of dirt-stained cloths. Jack stands at the far end, his back to them, arguing, in hushed tones, with a woman the same shawl-clad figure from the graveyard. Her voice is sharp, laced with urgency, and Poirot catches the name Eliza again. He steps forward, his cane tapping once, deliberately, on the stone floor. The sound echoes, and both figures spin around. Jack's face is flushed with panic. But the woman Margaret Grey Poirot presumes stands tall, her eyes blazing with defiance. "Monsieur Riley, Madame Grey," Poirot says, his voice calm but commanding, "the game is over. The Phantom of Hollow's End is no ghost, but a scheme to unearth a long-buried truth." Margaret, her shawl slipping to reveal grey-streaked hair and a face etched with years of grief, laughs bitterly. "You know nothing, detective," she says, but Poirot holds up the locket, its silver glinting in the lantern light. "This, Madame, tells me much. It belonged to Eliza Grey, your ancestor, did it not?" Margaret's composure falters, and Poirot presses on, laying out his deductions. The locket, buried with Eliza, held proof of her affair with Lord Henry Blackwood, a child, perhaps, or a secret that threatened the family's honour. Lord Henry's confession admitted to covering up her death, staged as an accident after a disagreement on the cliff. Margaret, Eliza's great-niece, learned of this through family letters and sought the locket to expose the Blackwoods' crime. Jack, sweating, tries to interrupt, but Poirot silences him with a raised hand. He turns to Margaret, revealing the ledger from the factory. "You used X-12, supplied by Monsieur Carver, to dissolve bodies in recent graves, searching for Eliza's unmarked one. The locket was your prize, but why destroy the others?" Eyes fill with tears, and she confesses. Eliza's grave was lost to time, but family stories pointed to the cemetery's east corner. She dug up recent graves, using X-12 to erase evidence, hoping to find the locket without drawing attention. Jack, her cousin, and a factory worker helped for a share of the reward she planned to demand from Sir Reginald of Fortune to keep the scandal quiet. Poirot shakes his head, his voice gentle but firm. "Madame, your quest for justice became a crime. The truth of Eliza's death is yours, but the means." He trails off, letting the weight of her actions sink in. Jack, realizing the game is up, drops to his knees, admitting he only followed Margaret's orders, fearing her wrath. Poirot produces the confession, showing Margaret that Lord Henry's own words damn him. "This will be enough," he says, "to honour Eliza without further destruction." Before Margaret can respond, a shout echoes from the cave's entrance. Constable Finch arrives with 2 officers, alerted by Hastings' earlier message. Margaret and Jack surrender, their fight drained by Poirot's relentless logic. As they're led away, Margaret clutches the locket, whispering for Eliza. Poirot watches, his expression a mix of triumph and sorrow. The phantom was no spirit, but a woman driven by pain, her justice twisted into vengeance. Back at Blackwood Manor, Poirot meets Sir Reginald, who's stunned by the revelations. The confession and locket will tarnish the family name, but Poirot advises honesty. The truth, monsieur, heals more than it harms. Sir Reginald nods, promising to make amends, perhaps by honouring Eliza with a proper memorial. Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave Hollow's End, the fog lifting as the village breathes easier, its ghostly rumours laid to rest. At their lodgings, Poirot polishes his cane, reflecting on the case. Hastings, he says, the human heart is the true mystery, Nan. It buries secrets, but they always rise. Hastings, sipping tea, nods, already romanticizing the adventure. Poirot smiles, his little grey cells satisfied. The case is closed, the phantom unmasked, and Eliza Gray's truth shines at last as the train pulls away from Hollow's End. Poirot gazes out the window, the cliffs fading into the mist. The story ends with a call to action. If you've enjoyed this tale of mystery and deduction, hit that like button, subscribe for more adventures, and comment below, would you have spotted the phantom's clues? Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next mystery.